Hey everyone, welcome to week 4. This week we'll be talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is typography. So we'll be talking about some of the basic terms and concepts related to typography as a design element, and then working on some designs that convey a specific message just using typography. So make sure you're reading through the module overview and of course, clicking into all of these great resources. So these will give you a lot of good background on typography that you'll need for the quiz, and will give you some ideas on how to approach the project this week. So we'll get you started with that. So in this activity, you'll be diving into one of the most expressive tools in a designer's toolkit, and that is indeed typography. So it's not just about making text readable, it's about using type to evoke emotion and deliver messages with impact. So we'll be doing that this week. Looking through the assignment, the scenario is you're a freelance graphic designer, client has asked you to work on a new project, and they've given you 2 key messages, a verse that should make people feel hopeful, and a call to action that should inspire desire and motivation. And your task is to use typography alone, no images or extra design elements, to visually express each message with clarity and feeling. So part 1 is the verse. And for the verse, you'll be using the provided Illustrator template to focus on creating a hopeful tone using type. And the requirements are choose no more than 2 typefaces, stick to black, white, or gray, use only 2 font sizes and 2 font styles, so for example bold or italic, and don't add any imagery or decorative elements. This is typography only. And then once you have that complete, you want to save that as a PDF file. So you want to think carefully about the mood you want to create. So a soft serif font might feel a little more uplifting. Clean sans serif font could bring, clarity, lightness. Script could, add emphasis and like a gentle, hopeful feeling. So you can test out a few options with that. And then part 2 is the call to action. And this is where your typography needs to stir a desire to drive the viewer to act. So you'll use the second Illustrator template, and again, select 2 typefaces that communicate urgency or appeal. Again, keep your font color to black, white, and gray. Use only 2 sizes and 2 styles of type, and focus on type only, no images or color accents. When you're done with that, save that one as a PDF. And then, of course, part 3 is the email. So you'll write a short professional email to your client explaining the choices you made. And in one double-spaced page, you'll answer the following. What fonts did you choose for each design? Why did you choose them? How did these choices align with the client's emotional goals? And how did your font sizes and styles help support this message? So you'll document that as a Word document and upload that as well. Now, here are the templates for part 1 and part 2. So you'll want to make sure you download these. You'll be working in Illustrator for this one. So this is the verse. This is where you want to evoke emotion. And then part 2 is where you want to really inspire action. And the one thing that I always like to introduce students to is Adobe fonts. You may or may not have worked with Adobe fonts in the past, but it's a great resource. It gives you access to tons of high quality type, and that's all included with your Creative Cloud subscription. So we all have access to Creative Cloud, so therefore you have access to Adobe fonts. So you just go to fonts.adobe.com, and from here you can install fonts that you like, and they basically sync with your Creative Cloud account. So it makes it easy, whether you're designing in Illustrator or Photoshop or InDesign or even, creating a website, you can use Adobe fonts. And what's great about it is that they're licensed. So if you're working with a client, you don't have to worry about licensing a specific commercial font to use, if you're creating a logo or something like that. And I've actually worked with plenty of clients in the recent years who have turned to using mainly Adobe fonts for their brand guidelines. So this is why I always go over this, because it is great real world information to have. So to get started, like I said, go to fonts.adobe.com, and basically you'll find a font that you want to work with. Let's say we like this one, and you'll click on this add family or add fonts. So you have the family down here. It shows you the different options. If you just want one, you can just click add font. If you want both of them, you could click add family. And there are multiple options. Some fonts, have one particular style underneath. Some have multiple. So it all depends on what you're looking at and the the look that you're going for. So you can search by font name, designer, classification, and I always recommend going to browse all. And you can see, there's different tags here. So if you want, a calligraphy type font, you can click on that and kind of scroll through these. If you want like a funky kind of font, these always have some fun ones. And you can also, type the font that you want, the text that you want to use in here, and it will appear here so you can see what it looks like. So I'm just going to open up Illustrator. I have this first line of this verse. Let's say I want kind of a brush type of font for this. I can see, what that would look like. So going back into Illustrator for this, just a few tips. Of course, you'll want to delete the directions from up here, and then you can always resize this text box, make it a little bit bigger. And then you'll select the fonts that you want. So I'm going to show you my font library, and you can see all of these little clouds here. These are all Adobe Cloud fonts that I have installed. And of course, I have regular OpenType and TrueType fonts. These are mainly like my system fonts that you're seeing here. I have some Google fonts added, but I mean, you can use fonts from anywhere. I always in the past have used defont.com. What I like about Adobe fonts is you don't have to download anything to your computer and then unzip it and then install it. It just makes it very easy and integrates really nicely with the Adobe software. So this is kind of an example that I put together, just combining two fonts. I always like to play with using like a clean sans serif font with like a script. You don't have to do it this way. And I also adjusted some spacing here just to add a little bit more emphasis. It kind of makes like a neat like tree looking shape. Again, you can approach this however you want. If you want to adjust this so it's left justified, you can always do that. If you want to keep it centered, you can do that. But I varied some sizes so you can see that this is 36. The rest of this text is 21. The different font that I'm using is also 36. And then I have some like variation on shades of gray that I'm using, some darker colors that I'm using. I don't think I have any like pure black in this, but so you can kind of play around with that. And for the call to action, I just kind of approached it like this. So putting a lot of emphasis on the event, and then, bolding the when, and the why, essentially. I have these details in italics, and I'm using, 2 shades of gray here, essentially. So again, you can feel free to, add space and, kind of play with the line spacing here. One thing that I would recommend, just looking at this one, let me reopen the original call to action. One of the things that you'll notice is if you try to resize this, it's going to stretch. And I always like to show people this just because this is one of those weird things with Illustrator. If you grab the text tool and you just click to add text, and then you try to resize it, it will stretch. So the one thing that I always recommend doing is using your type tool, draw a text box. It'll fill with lorem ipsum text, and that's okay. And then you can grab this text. I'm just gonna fill this with this, and then when you try to resize it, it will resize your text accordingly without stretching it. So it'll resize it to the size of the text box. So I always like to show people that because I often see, people who aren't very familiar with Illustrator, just kind of clicking to add their text, and then, they'll try to resize it and then it gets squished like this. So try to avoid that by, again, drawing that text box out. So have fun with this. I'm excited to see what everybody does with their text. If you have any questions on Adobe fonts, just let me know. And of course, if you have any questions on the projects this week, let me know about that as well.